Hello everyone, this short video clip is being made for those of you whose kids are doing extra lessons or you're waiting to see what this first term brings, this first term of the academic year, so that you can decide whether your children need help outside of school or not. Their report is a bit like a profit and loss, and you need to know how to read it. That's what I want to help you with today so that you can make informed choices. Although I may be the principal of Lockerbie College, I actually got into this whole life because I was a parent. And a lot of my perspective is going to be as a parent's perspective would be. So it wasn't so long ago that I was you, and I want to share what I've learned in reading this report, Profit and Loss, for my own kids. And now I do it for the kids who I teach extra lessons to. You're going to see on the screen a sheet that's numbered 1. And when you get your child's report, the first thing that you need to look at is how many students are actually in the class. Because when you see that, you realize that your child is getting, if there are 30 kids in the class, 1/30th of the teacher's time and attention. 1/30th. You need to see how many children are actually in the class. And at the end of term report, some of you might actually see the position that your child is in form. In the one that I'm showing you, the student in question is placed 23 out of 33 children. So this student is pretty much in the lower third of the form that he is actually in. That's a really important number because of 1/30th of the attention he is actually getting. You can see right off the bat that he certainly needs far more than 1/30th of the attention. If he doesn't get any more attention than that, he's not going to be able to improve his position and form of coming 23rd. The other thing you need to look at is his overall term average. Now in this case, it's 42.6%. So there have been some subjects where the student has passed, and there are a lot of subjects in which the student has failed. Now it hasn't been a dismal, hopeless fail down in the 20s and 10s, but 30s are poor enough. So you have a combination there of a lot of kids in the class, a student who's placing in the lower third, and who's actually failing overall. Now, not all reports have it, but some do. How does this 42.6%, which the student has attained, actually compare to the class average? Now, if the class average is in the 60s or 70s, this student scoring less than 50% is a big problem. If the class average, well, for one reason, if the class average is 53% and 53% of the children in this class of 33 are actually passing, here's a big problem for another reason. One of them is a problem of learning, and the other one is obviously a problem of teaching, or it could be that it's a problem of both. So this is the first thing that you actually need to look at. The second sheet, number 2, that you'll see on your screen, you need to look at the core subject grades, math and English language, and if they're doing English literature as well. Math in itself is a whole language, and it's a whole way of thinking, and it's a whole way of understanding concepts and abstracts. And English literature is another whole language and another way of understanding concepts and abstracts, but this is now a different abstract language. Now, on the report that you're looking at, this student has actually failed all 3 of these cores. Maths was 35%, English Lang 36%, and English Lit 28%. Now, 36% shows weaknesses enough in English language, but 28% in English literature. Now, English literature is far more complex because it involves reading, a lot of reading at secondary school, because this is a secondary age student. The student's actually in Form 2. It involves reading, it involves more complex vocabulary, it involves vocabulary in context, It obviously involves reading for meaning. It involves all the predictions and the deductions and the inferences and that kind of thing. It involves understanding the way that plot and summary are actually used. It involves all those literary devices, all that figurative language and that kind of thing. A lot is involved in English literature, and the most important thing, of course, is the great higher order thinking skills that students have to do well in English Lit. So looking at those core subjects is key. It's the first thing you should actually be looking at when you're reading your profit and loss of your child's end of term report. The other thing is you need to look at the comments. Is the emphasis on the child making the improvement that's needed, or is the emphasis on the teacher changing their approach and supporting the child's progress? So if you look at math, greater effort is needed. If greater effort is needed, that means the child's disconnected from the subject in some way. It's very easy to point the finger at the student and possibly even the parent. But if greater effort is needed, whose job is it to motivate and inspire the student, help them, scaffold them, front load? Whose job is it for greater effort to take place in a math class and involvement in doing homework? That's a teacher's job. The student has to sweat a little bit, yes, but he has to be able to get started. He has to be able to know what he has to do, what the task is asking of him. He needs to be able to self-evaluate, and is he on the right path or on the wrong path and that kind of thing, and he has to be able to edit. So your student can't start a task feeling like a failure, therefore why should I even begin, and possibly even act up or act out, because no student wants to look dumb, they'd much rather look bad. So when you see greater effort is needed, that's a failure of teaching. Sorry to come down hard on that. That is not a failure of learning. If you look at English Lang and English Lit, often unprepared for class, encourage him to read and pay attention in class. So we've got a bit of a blend there. So for English language, often unprepared for class. You, the parent, need to ask, what can I do to help my child prepare for class? Has my child got all of his stationery? Has he got all of his books? Why is he unprepared? Is he unprepared because he doesn't want to do the class? You need to have a discussion there. When it comes to encourage him to read, the teacher's basically saying you, the parent, need to help this child read at home. And if that's the truth, and you know if your child's reading or not, and being on a computer doesn't constitute reading, right? Reading actually happens in a book, a real book, especially English literature. And there's obviously a problem there, and you as a parent need to get to the bottom of it, and you possibly need to spend time, or probably need to spend time with your child to actually encourage him to read and read with him. Too many things involved when you're reading a novel. There's too much complex learning going on, and you, the parent, need to step up. However, where it says pay attention in class, what you're doing is probably going to front load information that the student's going to be reading in class, and possibly read ahead if you possibly can. But pay attention in class. Yes, parents, arm your students with front knowledge so that they're more engaged in class, but it's not actually your job to keep the child's attention in a class. It's a teacher's job. If the teacher doesn't have it in them to engage your child, that's something the teacher has to start doing. You can only do your part by helping, but the teacher is queen of her castle or king of his castle in that classroom, and paying attention is a teacher's job. No one should be so disinterested that they don't pay attention. So you've got to be able to read these reports. Page 3 that you're going to be seeing on your screen, I want you to look at what your child is actually good at, what they're performing well in, and ask yourself, what's a common denominator? Now in this report, 51% in French, fair effort. 57% in Spanish, fair effort. 67% in music, fairly good. 48% in home economics. Don't mind it was a fail. Works well in practical, must do better in theory. Now theory is read, correct? Practical is what we do. If you look at all of those together, it shows that they're not heavily language-based in the English sense. One is French, so they're acquiring a language and the mechanics of it, doing okay. Spanish, acquiring the language and the mechanics of it, doing okay. Music is a language in itself, doing okay. Yes? Home economics, that in itself is language related, but he's working well in the practical. So just as he, beats those eggs in home economics, he's playing the piano or playing a flute or beating the drums, and he's doing all right. So we have a kinesthetic learner, and to some extent we probably have an auditory learner, because picking up the language and that kind of thing, doing well in. So look at what your child is actually doing well in and look at the common denominator. My guess is that the vocabulary and the contextual information and the vocabulary, the specific vocabulary of subjects in the English language are what's causing this kid trouble. And that's the English language that's also used in thinking through maths. So you've got to look at that. Look at the language-based subjects. Is there a common thread, like grades or comments? So let's look at English lang, unprepared for class. For some reason, this kid isn't eager to bring all of his pencils. English lit, encourage him to read and pay attention in class, totally disengaged. So that's 2 English subjects disengaged. Integrated science, needs to hand in all assignments. For some reason, this kid isn't doing homework at home. Does he know what he has to do? Can he get started? Can he take the risks? Does he have a healthy sense of fear of failure? Does he mind trying, or does he think it's useless to start off with? What about social studies? Heavy English language, 30% unsatisfactory. Technology education, 41%. This is your computers and so on, which kids love, right? A greater effort is needed next term. Something is very wrong there, because this child is disconnecting almost in every single English-based subject. Everything to do with the English language, this child is disconnecting. From reading, to involvement, to paying attention, to preparation, to not doing homework, to just plain unsatisfactory. What does this tell you? This tells you that something's wrong that you have to investigate. Because the school that this child, which doesn't appear on this form, but the school that this child got into, this child would have had to score in the 60s, possibly the 70s in the common entrance. And yet in Form 2, if you read this profit and loss of the term's accomplishments, you will see that that child has gone from what is probably a 70s student in 11 plus, 2 years later to failing the majority of the subjects. And every subject that involves English is failing. Number 4 on your screen, you're going to have to focus on the comments that give you clues on how you can support your child's improvement, because let's face it, you may or may not have meaningful parent-teacher evenings. Teachers might actually not come. Teachers might tell you your child's fine in class, absolutely fine. And what you're going to find out is that if your child actually gives no trouble and is getting 40%, that child is causing that teacher no trouble whatsoever, none whatsoever. So that teacher is just going to continue teaching, not pay that child any special attention. That child will continue to fail. And the good news that you'll be hearing in the parent-teacher meetings is your child's absolutely fine in class, gives me no trouble. I just wish, you would prepare a little more or have a little bit more effort or whatever. You know what? Just like a teacher can't control what happens at home, you as a parent can't control what happens in the classroom. Yeah? You're going to have to try and have some productive meetings and deal with it, but this sheet is to help you focus on what you need to do at home to help your child improve. 2 hands, gotta clap. 1 hand is not going to make it. This sheet is about your job. How can you support your child's improvement? So this is where you actually have to look at what the comments are. Unprepared in class. Ask your child about this. Talk to your child about this. What does the teacher mean? Do you think you're unprepared in class? Are we talking about an attitude being unprepared? Or are you talking about your materials being unprepared? Are you forgetting your work at home? Are you not doing your homework? Let me see your timetable. When do you have these English classes? Is it the day after that you've been swimming until 6 o'clock at night? Is it when you're coming home exhausted? Is it when you're getting up early to go to swimming and you're forgetting to pack your bag? It may be some restructuring that you actually have to do at home. I've already spoken about the encouraging to read. not have your child read and tell them go read a book. Sit down and read with them. Read it in chunks, little bit by little bit, giving them time to process. Chunks are like this. Focus on comments that give you clues on how you can support your child's improvement. If there's an unfamiliar word, see if you can clue it by going to a derivative or a word that's similar. If you can't clue it, maybe your child can look it up on a thesaurus on their phone. Give them an excuse to use their phone. They love it. Don't search a dictionary, search a thesaurus, because that will give a clue to the word you need to clue. And it will give them another word, another 3 or 4 words that they don't actually know. The other one is must do better with theory. Theory means you've got to support that at home, because this kid is doing home economics fantastic in the classroom, but must do better with theory. That means that the actual written text that they have to pick apart and prepare and understand and do a review on after class and possibly do homework, they're going to need your help with that. Needs to hand in all assignments. I'm afraid homework is for home. And I don't want to say, as a parent, that's your responsibility, but deep down we all know it is. Deep down, you don't check on homework by saying, have you done your homework? Kids are going to tell you, yeah. You've got to go and check what the quality of that homework is. And another one is often unprepared for class. So we have 2 examples of that. And if one of those is actual not handing in work, you now have evidence of 3 things on that sheet. Unprepared for class, needs to hand in all assignments, often unprepared for class, and even encouraging to read means your child hasn't read in preparation for class. So basically a lot of this, the teacher is crying out to help for you. Yeah? For you to step in as a parent. Are there any repetitions? Well, we see that they are, and your job is not to teach, but yes, it's to provide structure at home and to support where you have to. Parents, take heart. If you help your child in Form 1, Form 2 and Form 3, I can promise you when those years of CXCs hit in Form 4, Form 5, you would have done your job and you can then step back. The worst thing you can do is step back at the beginning of Form 1. The 11 plus is basically an exam of time and details. It's not an exam of knowledge. It's not an exam of application. It's not an exam of synthesis or analytics. It is an exam of time, memorization, and details. Yeah, spell it right, you get it right. Okay, so you parents, you have to step in. On sheet 5, what some reports have, which really helps, is where there's an effort grade. So next to the average for the term, you will see 1, 2, or 3, or 3, 2, and 1, or 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are effort grades. And so the sheet that you're now going to be seeing on your screen, I have put in effort grades because this school has not doesn't give students effort grades. 1 is high, 2 is average, and 3 is weak. Now, how do we read this profit and loss? If your child gets 50% with an effort of 1, your child gives his subject his or her all. You've got to take that into account, which means there's something else you have to investigate if they're only getting 50%. But if your child's getting 35% with an effort of 3, there's a correlation. They're not putting in the effort, and the big question is why, and not putting in the effort and the reason behind it is the reason why they're getting 35%. So if there's an effort grade on the report, it tells you a lot. I remember my son coming home from a government school when he was in his secondary years, and the 90s were great, the 70s were okay too, some 60s fine as well, but if he brought me home a 60 with a 3, or a 90 with a 3, or a 70 with a 3, I wanted to know why he was putting in the effort. Because if he could get 90 with a 3, imagine what he could get with a 1. So why was this child not putting in the effort to get 99? Why not? Because children will only work as hard as they have to, right? You need to start drilling into them that they need to compete with themselves. So there's a lot that little effort grade can give you. If you have, or your child's report comes home and they don't have an effort grade, ask them what effort was, 1, 2, or 3, and you write it in on that report. Because I've done this a lot with kids when I've been teaching study skills, and you know what? I find 2 things. One thing is they're always honest. They're always honest. question them, they're always pretty honest. Ask them then, what effort do you think your teacher would say that you put in? And see if they're similar. See if they're similar. Because if a child puts in a 1 and says the teacher would say that they put in a 2, why does the teacher say that? What does the teacher say in class? Yeah? You've got to look at that. So you need to look at where they've done the 1s and how that correlates with the grades, and where they're saying they put in a 3 and how that correlates with the grades, or what is their teachers actually say about them. And believe me, they're not really going to know what you're actually doing because you're kerfuffling them. So just go for it. Ask your child if these are honest, if they do come in with a 1, 2, and 3, and ask what he or she would do to raise the effort grade, and listen to them. Don't judge them. If they've got a 3 in a subject they've got 70% in, say, okay, what do you need to do to make that 3 a 1? Not raise that 70, but make that 3 a 1. What would you have to do? Well, I would probably have to stop passing sweets to little Tommy who sits next to me. Well, there you go. Why are you passing sweets? Because like, I'm bored, I know it, I get it really fast. Well, obviously you don't get it bad and you get 70%. So how can we get you 90% with an effort of 1? Because right now, your teacher's disappointed in you. Because she knows you have the potential of 90. She knows you have the potential of a 1, and you're not pulling out the stops and doing your job properly. Do you need me to go and have a talk with your teacher and say to your teacher, you know, my son really feels he could be doing more. Is there extra work you could give him or whatever? There's always something you could do. Always something you could do. So you need to look at that. And finally, on sheet number 6, which you're going to be seeing on your screen, collaborate with a child for a plan for improvement. That's what this report is about. It's what's done is done. This profit and loss is to help you have a greater profit, lesser loss next term. So what are you going to do? Collaborate with your child because you need a plan for improvement. And I hate to say this, negotiate. Negotiate with your child. Set a target that is manageable and not completely out of space. That is absolutely manageable and is sequential. So going from a 60 to a 90, is that pragmatic? Is it manageable? Is it doable? Is it realistic? Set something that's manageable because you actually want to set it a little on the low side so they can exceed it. And negotiate. What are you going to get? They love rewards, right? I don't believe in money and phones and all that kind of thing. However, maybe, you know, you could sleep until 9 on a Saturday morning. Negotiate. I'll do your clothes every other week for you. Negotiate. Negotiate if they meet that target and negotiate what they're going to get if they actually exceed it. And make to-do lists. You know, what's it going to take from me studying that's going to help me meet that target? What's it going to take from me outside of studying with a change of life? Maybe going to bed earlier, maybe doing something that's, make a list. And each subject may very well be different because each subject will have its own complexities and challenges and so on. If you look on the sheet, you will see that in English language, gets 36 this term, try and get 50. I know you can get 50. In English Lit, 28 to 40 because I'm going to be doing some reading with you. French, 51 to 65. You're good at French. Okay, we got to get that up. Home economics, let's see if we can pass. I'm going to help you focus on the theory. Integrated science, 36 to 50. And let's see if you can turn around the majority of failing to majority of passing. Don't be overly ambitious. It may be just a bare pass at first, but this will be going into term 2. And in term 3, we want a decent pass. Because if you hit term 3 and you haven't had a strategy and you haven't used the profit and loss of this end of term report really to your child's advantage, in term 3 you're going to then have panic because it's a short term, they're promotional exams, and you could be looking at stopping down. Because a student in term 1 of form 2 who comes 23rd out of 33 and their overall term average is 42.6%, is looking at stopping down 2 terms later. So you've got to get proactive. What does this have to do with extra lessons? If this child is actually missing out on a huge chunk of curriculum or unable to access it because it's not being taught in the way in which they learn, you need to consider extra lessons. And when you go to an extra lessons teacher, there's no point putting your child in a class of 20 or 10 or sometimes even 5. You need your child in a class where they can get meaningful support to supplement and complement and augment what they're doing in class. Get your child into extra lessons with 1-on-1, 2-on-1, 3-on-1 with kids who are probably at their level, looking at the same topics. So don't send your child where they may be 4 different kids from 4 different schools doing 4 different things in an extra lessons class. When it comes to extra lessons, you need to ask a whole set of questions about that. If you want to chat further, give us a call at Lockerbie, 435-3069 or 434-3673. You can email me on schooldirector@lockerbiecollege.com and give us a shout. We're here to help.